Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and about a week ago, the Express published an article claiming that there were Brexit benefits after all. Unfortunately, what they were reporting, with a completely straight face, metaphorically, were benefits for EU member states. Now, in this video, I'd like to take a look at the latest trade figures and wonder what the Brexiteers who kept banging on about trade surpluses must think of it all. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, like one of the reasons for leaving the EU, according to Brexiteers, is they would argue that we've got this trade deficit with the EU. I mean, yes, they did. Some of them, to be fair, didn't use that as a reason for leaving the EU. They used it as a reason for why the EU will give us brilliant terms with the trade deal. Because they sell more to us than we do to them, so they need us more than we need them. We already know how that worked out. You know, we have spent the last few decades focusing our economy on services rather than goods. So we imported significantly more by value in terms of goods than we exported. So for the trade in goods, there was indeed a trade deficit with the rest of the EU as it was at the time, and now we'd call that the EU. And Brexiteers highlighted this as something that's bad. Unfortunately, there was no real joined up thinking as to how leaving the EU would change this balance of trade. In order to change a trade deficit into a surplus, well, one of two things has to happen. One, you can export more to the point where your value of exports exceeds your value of imports. It's not immediately obvious to me how raising trade barriers with the EU was going to help us export more goods to them. In fact, our extreme Tory Brexit seemed designed to reduce our exports. And this is no longer hypothetical. Our exports have been reduced. They've gone down. The EU have just published their latest trade data. We can see that, from my point of view, UK exports to the EU, what they would call UK imports, have fallen by 17.1%. So then we come to the second way you can change from deficit to surplus in the balance. You can get away without exporting more, as long as you import less. It's just a subtraction at the end of the day, isn't it? But there are numerous problems with this as a deliberate strategy. The first is, if you don't pursue a policy of growing exports, your country doesn't make as much money. It's really that simple. That means jobs lost. A country is much like a business in this regard. You buy and you sell, and the value of what you sell is what makes you the money. The second issue is that if you just import less, then what are you doing? Are you producing more for your own market? No, we're not doing that. You couldn't do that overnight anyway, but we don't even have policies in place to increase the level of manufacturing in the UK. In fact, manufacturing is declining. So the second consequence of importing less is that you have less available for your citizens. The general population cannot buy what they could before. Less choice, less access to things. Besides, we're not importing less from the EU. By value, we're importing more after Brexit. Because those same trade figures show that EU imports to the UK, or exports from their point of view, increased by 6.2%. So our exports have fallen by 17% and our imports have risen by 6% with the EU. You don't have to be brilliant at maths to see that what that means is that trade deficit, which was considered such a problem for Brexiteers, has just gotten wider. And it's a lot wider. The end column provides the trade balance for the EU. In the first half of 2020, it was 56.7 billion euros. Now it's 82.1. That's an increase on the balance of trade in the EU's favour of 45%. And the thing about that statistic is you don't get to go on about the pandemic. If I just talked about the EU exports to the UK, comparing 2021 with 2020, you might say, well, of course the European exports have gone up. Europe was generally closed for business for a big chunk of that period of time last year. Obviously, the numbers were going to be better this year. But the figures also show a drop in exports from the UK. Yes, the pandemic made it harder for us to trade last year. So why haven't UK exports to the EU increased? Brexit, of course. This is how damaging Brexit is for our economy and how it's worse even than the pandemic. Last year we had the pandemic and we weren't EU members. We were still in the customs union single market though. This year we've moved out of the pandemic restrictions on trade, but we are out of the customs union single market. In actual fact, what is surprising about these figures is not that our exports are down. It's that the EU exports have gone up in this year of Brexit. Trade barriers, after all, are supposed to work both ways. The same difficulties that we now have in selling to the EU are supposed to be replicated for EU businesses trying to sell to us. But of course, we haven't put those same trade barriers in place for the EU. This is why we have no leverage over the EU. The value of their trade with us has increased thanks to Brexit. A 45% increase in their balance of trade on what was already a surplus. And this will continue until we put those trade barriers in place for EU businesses, just like they have for ours. But we're not doing that. The reason is we're too dependent upon imports from our European neighbours. The country would be plunged into crisis if we did that. We're already struggling because of the reduction in British food production and distribution thanks to Brexit worker shortages. The data on our side from the Office for National Statistics highlighted that our exports have been falling further recently. It noted a weak increase in exports to non-EU countries, which didn't come close to compensating for our continued loss of trade to the EU. And consider that. For those who think that we just left the customs union single market in January and that was that, consider that our exports are continuing to fall more recently. But by this time, shouldn't more businesses be learning about how to trade as a third country, how to fill in the paperwork, all that jazz? Yeah, I'm sure they are. But despite all that, January was not the worst month from which we have now recovered. Our trade continues to decline. This is because our lost trade wasn't teething problems, as the government tries to claim, but inherent issues with Brexit, as actual trade experts have made clear. And it's just going to carry on getting worse. So we can't apply trade barriers against EU businesses, even though it's not just our right, but actually we're expected to do it according to World Trade Organization rules. But we simply can't afford to further strangle our source of essential imports, food, medicines. So the government keeps putting them off. They've already ruled out having them in place until next summer. When it gets anywhere close to next summer, they'll delay it again. And the longer this goes on, the more the EU gain from Brexit. We have no influence in the EU anymore. From one of the big three to not even the crap on the bottom of their shoes, we don't work constructively with them. In fact, we keep stabbing them in the back. France recently are not very happy with us at all now. So there's no personal friendliness there while we have this current government. We have no economic pull on them either. I mean, you don't have to be friendly. People act in their national interest. If we had some economic leverage on them, well, they'd still have to work with us, but we don't, because they're reaping the benefits of trade thanks to our inability to cope with Brexit. We've got nothing at all. So these trade figures are going to continue to look bad for the UK with no negative consequences for the EU at all. The Express had better get used to writing articles about Brexit benefits for others. They are the only benefits they will find. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, see you later.